Well, we've written a couple of songs already, and they're not dark, are they? They're quite poppy, really.
I mean, you can always go into an album. If you read the booklet to go with the fundamental reissue, we say that we had this manifesto, which was very super electronic, electro-clashy, glitch and click, I think it says. And then we make the most orchestrated album we've ever done. I currently have an Apple iPhone 5 because when we were in Brazil on Copacabana Beach, coming back from dinner, me and Pete Gledl, our programmer, got hug-a-mugged. But actually, I'm getting a replacement tomorrow. That was a 6S, an iPhone 6S. And the moment I've got the little 5, but actually I quite like it, really. But we're both iPhone people.
We're not queuing up outside the Apple store for a new one.
Well, being boring was, people probably know, was about a very close friend of mine from Newcastle who died in 1989. He had HIV and he'd been my sort of best friend in the 70s and early 80s. So that's a very autobiographical song. I mean, I don't really need to say much more about it because they were just all in the lyrics. And it was the contrast of me becoming success. He and I were in my first group, Dust, which is a folk group, and that I became a sort of successful musician, and he became a teacher, and then he became ill, and then he died. And that was a terrible period to go through, the period of, I don't know, what we now call the AIDS crisis. It was a terrible period to live through. And there was a lot of that reflected in our songs, and particularly in the lyrics. And that's the most single intense sort of content of our lyrics was that period.
The most enjoyable was filming Being Boring with Bruce Webber, because that really wasn't like a video shoot, that was like a real party taking place. You were just surrounded by the most beautiful people, and the song was just on a loop playing. A song that changed loads was Left to My Own Devices. When it was written, it was like a Motown song. We worked with Trevor Horn and Steve Lipson, and sort of house music was just starting. And when we got in the studio, Steve Lipson had already housed it up and put that house bass line on and everything. So that changed loads from the demo. Is the demo available?
No.
Why not? It's not up to master quality, that's
why. There's not even...
Neil, in other words, Neil.
No, it doesn't mean Neil doesn't like it. It just means it's...
Was it not very good?
It's not very... I remember we played the demo to Trevor, and he got a bit precious about his speakers because the whole thing went totally into the red as the track went on.
Oh yeah.
I read something online that we've always said that Trevor had this idea. It's all true, this, by the way. Trevor had this idea that we'd program the machines, get the orchestral score written, and get everyone together and record the track in one day. I think I wrote this for the sleeve notes of something, and 6 months later it was finished. And then I saw an interview that Trevor gave, and he said that wasn't true. It took about a month or something. Well, he's wrong, because it did. We were in that. We started that early in the year, like February, and it wasn't finished till July, and it came out in September. And it was quite a journey, making that track. Even though on the first day of recording it was quite good. But Trevor was also making an album with Simple Minds. He was making an album with Paul McCartney. So he couldn't devote all the time to us. And it ended up taking 6 months. When we start working with a producer, we've used Elysium as an example. Pete Gledl sent Andrew Dawson, was producing it, all of the songs we'd worked on in the previous year or something. A lot of which, of course, ended up on electric. And then we went through them all with Andrew Dawson, decided on 12 to work on, maybe even 14. Vocal, the demo, which is pretty good, which is a great demo actually. And with working with Andrew, we were kind of trying to improve that demo. It wasn't really happening, so it never went on the album. We went with, is it 10 or 11, I can't remember now, on the finished album. When we worked with Xenomania, we went through a similar process, and also on the basis that we were going to write 3 songs with them. That was a sort of, not contractual, but we'd agreed that beforehand. And like when we played, so Gin and Jag, which is on the, was a kind of big B-side, that was one song we played to the Xenomania team and could have been on there. Then we had a song which we played to them called I'm Not Crying, I'm Laughing, which turned into All Over the World. We always thought there was something good about that. So often on an album you have something that's not quite finished, but you think, oh, there's something good about this, we should work on this as an extra track, and then that became a key track on the album. And the demo was very, very rough, which is why it doesn't appear on these. It was very much a sort of sketch. So each album in many ways has its own story about. When we did Introspective, we didn't even really we didn't even set out to make an album. We just started, we sort of collated it as we went along. And suddenly, let's do an album of 12-inch mixes. And normally you see what you've got when you finish the album. But I think if you look at the most contrasting thing is, on release, is the actual album, and then all the other songs. Because we wrote tons of electro songs, then we decided to go with the more guitar-y based songs, and we wanted to do this one mood album, which we pretty much did. And so you can sculpt the album really from a pile of very disparate songs. And I guess that's what we do each time. Working with Julie Mendelson was always fun.
Good bacon sandwiches at Psalm, that was good.
I used to like working at Psalm West. We used to work there for so long. So we worked on, not all, but some of actually Introspective, Behaviour, Bilingual, Nightlife. Oh, and of course, Fundamental. We worked at Psalm West, which is no longer there. And they had in-house cooks, and you'd bump into people. George Michael was always working in there. I mean, we got our programmer, Pete Gledel, because he was George Michael's programmer, and he wasn't. George Michael had thrown everyone out the studio, so Pete was always sitting there, and that's how we got. So we asked Pete to program our first tour, and then he started working with us when we were making new music. And so it was always fun. You bump into people. So that was a general thing. So rather than say which album, that was the studio. It was almost like a second, not quite a second home, but something like that. It was a lot of fun. I quite miss big studios, because nowadays you tend to do it at home, and working with Stuart, we do it at Stuart's studio, and it's just great fun. There's something about, I did a vocal for a group called Diamond Version, and they were making their album in Hansa Studios, famous Hansa Studios in Berlin. And I went there just for like 2 hours to sing the vocal for this song. And I thought how much I liked being in what we call a proper studio, where I don't know, you've got huge speakers, and people making you cups of coffee and things.